Good afternoon once again, and my name is Arjun Bahadur. I am the lead for the Life Skills Collaborative, and on behalf of the Life Skills Collaborative, I welcome you to the 5th edition of the LifeSkillsNet. Based on what I said, this is the 5th time that we are conducting the LifeSkillsNet session, and we've had some very fantastic conversations in the past. But before I start the conversation today, the Life Skills Collaborative, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, is a collaborative that has brought 18 organizations together. We work in partnership with 4 state governments, and we've been working for the last 2 years in the life skills space to try and solve 3 key problems that we feel are integral for making life skills more accessible to young people in India. We have a glossary, which is the first attempt of creating a common vocabulary for life skills in India. And I'll encourage you to visit our website, www.lifeskillscollaborative.in, and go through the glossary. It is probably the world's first glossary of life skills with 52 skills that is currently available in 4 languages. We are also creating assessments, and we are also talking to a lot of young people across the country to find out what they think about life skills. But today is more about the LifeSkillsNet, and LifeSkillsNet is a platform where we invite people like yourselves who work with life skills in different capacities across India to come, and it's a forum that we are trying to create. It's a platform that we are creating that allows us to learn and share from each other. Today's session is on building partnerships for Life Skills Collaborative in India. But before I go there, just some ground rules. Obviously, because we are using the format of Zoom, you will not be able to ask questions verbally. So I'll encourage you to please put your questions on the chat or on the Q&A section. We will address all questions at the end. What I'm going to invite is our moderator to ask questions to the panelists and engage in those conversations right at the beginning. But we will make sure that we leave at least 30 minutes at the end to take up your questions. So as and when you have questions, please start putting on the chat or on the Q&A sheet, and we will make sure that we take that to the panel. Other than that, there isn't really too many guidelines for you. Stay till the end. There's going to be a lot of learning. So as I was saying, today we want to talk about building partnerships for life skills in India. The focus of the conversation is going to be on a few things around what is the collaborative space in India looking like, especially for life skills. What makes these partnerships and collaboratives work? What are the different stakeholders that get involved, and what are the different types of roles that they play? And how can we learn from the experiences of our panel who have been part of such such partnerships and collaboratives in the past? With that, I want to introduce our very august panel today. To begin with, I want to introduce Dhanashree Rame, who is the Chief of Programs with Magic Bus. Dhanashree is a postgraduate from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences and has more than 24 years of experience working in gender, rights-based programming, microfinance, adolescent empowerment. She's worked at the grassroots level with the government and the United Nations. Before this, she was working with the United Nations Population Fund as a national program specialist for gender. She was responsible for the overall program coordination. In the past, she's also worked with the World Bank and has worked with clients such as the South Asian Coalition on Child Servitude. Welcome, Dhanashree. And I want to add that Dhanashree is also a key member of the Life Skills Collaborative and has played an important role in shaping and guiding the work that the LSC has been doing.
Thank you.
Welcome, Dhanashree.
Thank you.
Then I want to introduce Shiv Diwan. Shiv has spent a decade and a half in his quest to help young people find a marriage between purpose, passion, profitability, and patriotism. His startup, One Step Up, had taken him to classrooms in 50 different cities in India. He was with GAME earlier, and where he worked, he was responsible for bringing together multiple organizations to reach young adults. His current role at Aflatun allows him to continue to engage with multiple stakeholders, from governments to NGOs to for-profits to parents to volunteers. Aflatun has partners across 100 countries, and we look forward to learning from his experiences. He is an alumnus of IIM Indore and of the Shri Ram College of Commerce. Welcome, Shiv. We're excited to have you. And finally, I want to welcome our third panelist, Radhika Menon. Radhika has been working in the education and skill development sector for over 9 years. She has a master's in economics from Pune University and a master's in education from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Her experience spans grassroots work in rural India to strategy and policy with the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship and the NSDC. She's passionate about working at the intersection of education, TVET, and livelihoods. And in her current role with Yuva, aims to build Yuva's unique position as a partnership platform to amplify access to quality solutions in learning and skilling. Welcome, Radhika. And finally, I want to introduce our moderator for the day. We have Priyanka Anand Chadda, who brings more than 12 years of experience in the social impact sector. Her focus areas have been nonprofit strategy, program implementation, design, and grant management. As an associate principal with Satwa, Priyanka leads the Bharat EdTech Initiative, which is a multi-stakeholder collaborative to address the digital learning divide in India. Before joining Satwa, Priyanka was the head of the Pehla Akshar Foundation of the RPG group, and she spent 5 years before that working with Dasra, leading the transformation team there. She has an MBA from the Indian School of Business and has a master's in social science from the National University of Singapore. She also has a bachelor, an honors degree in economics from the Lady Shri Ram College, Delhi University. With that, I am going to hand it over to you, Priyanka, to take the conversation forward, and I'm going to take out my pen and start taking some notes. Over to you.
Thanks, Arjun. It's always a bit embarrassing to have these introductions, so I'm glad that's over with. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to jump right into the conversation with Shiv, Dhanashree, and Radhika. Now, I do represent a collaborative, right? So this might be a bit biased, but I don't think it's much of a stretch to say that we are living in the age of collaboratives and partnerships. I think while we never worked in silos before, I think the enthusiasm with which we've accepted the need to work together over the past 5 to 7 years, the excitement with which we actually actively seek out others that we want to work with, co-create, co-own not just the problem, but also the solution is something new in the sector. And I'm really, really excited that this is where we are today, because I do think that the kind of wicked problems that we're facing as a country need multi-stakeholder solutions that cannot just be driven by one lens. Like I said, I might be a bit biased, but that's my belief, right? And so I'm really, really excited to be talking to you all today, because I know you all also represent collaboratives or have been leading large-scale partnerships. And so I want to start today's conversation, just hearing a little bit about your experiences. So let's start with a very, very big question, which is, Shiv, you leading partnerships at Aflatun, Dhanashree, working with the LifeSkills Collaborative representing Magic Bus, and Radhika leading Yuva and all the work that they do in bringing partners together. Help me understand a little bit of your experiences, what works, what are some of the best practices you've learned along the way, and just some examples to really set the tone for the rest of the conversation. Radhika, would you like to start?
Sure. Thanks, Priyanka. Just one quick clarification, not leading Yuva. I have 2 amazing bosses. I do lead just the initiatives and partnerships around skills for life and livelihoods. But thank you for having me on this panel. I think Yuva, positioned as a public-private youth partnership, would love to bring my experiences both as a part of Yuva as well as one of the collaborative initiatives that we drove within Pillar 2 or within the Skills for Life and Livelihoods vertical at Yuva. Just taking a step back to put in perspective what we do at Yuva. As a member of Yuva, we are a public-private youth partnership platform instituted and incubated by UNICEF. In our essence, we are a partnership alliance with long-term goals to engage 300 million young people as change leaders, equip 200 million with the skills they need for the future, and also create pathways for 100 million to jobs and entrepreneurship by 2030. Now, those figures itself speak to the ambitious goals and also underline that these cannot be fulfilled alone. And so we are intentionally working together with partners and especially with young people themselves to generate cutting edge solutions as well as new ideas to prepare young people to transition from education and learning to productive work and also engaging them in as active citizens. An extension of Yuva was the Young Warrior Next initiative, which we conceptualized and launched in August 2021. So this was on the back of the second wave of COVID. It started as a brainstorm between a group of Yuva's partners who wanted to solve for the learning disruption caused by schools, the closures and COVID at large in general. With schools reopening still remaining a question mark back then, the problem we wanted to solve for was what would be a meaningful learning initiative that could also serve as a gap year program. So life skills with its relevance to both employability as well as mental health was zeroed in as a focus because it aided the schools are shut, but let's learn for life objective as well. And this was a shared value project co-created with our partners who saw an opportunity and a common thread linking their goals to the mission of that larger group. Eventually, the larger group did break up. We did have a steering committee come together that was more hands-on in driving the initiative, as well as working groups where partners could come and contribute to that common agenda. And therefore, the program itself pivoted from creating that, the gap year program to sort of executing a sandbox of testing scalable pilots in life skills. So still very committed to the life skills piece. This decision was also not driven by Yuva alone. It was a collective decision, and that was a key success factor for the platform initiative. So 15 models were piloted and tested in under 9 months after launch, and within with the whole program concluding within a year of its launch. And this was because of the collaborative efforts. It was because partners decided to come together to deliver to this evidence generation activity. And so just speaking to, it's that shared urgency is what not only brought us together, but also ensured a sustained commitment. Historically too, I think there is a precedence for the shared urgency driving a sustained collaborative effort. Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, speaks to it. So while the use case for collaborators is plentiful, especially in driving larger scale, longer term issues, humanitarian responses or emergency response programs definitely have the power to not just pull together, but also sustain a group of more diverse stakeholders. So that's been one key learning, working in a collaborative as well as leading the Young Warrior Next program.
Thank you so much, Radhika. Thanks for sharing a lot about the program so far and also leaving us with that one use case. Shiv, would love to hear from you next.
So just in order to help the listener in this, because the space is quite complicated, I'm going to pick up the first point you brought in, Priyanka, in terms of if we're looking at situations where collaboratives can come in. One you defined as where there's a wicked problem, where you don't really know what is the solution you're chasing. The second one that Radhika defined over there is when you want speed and scale, both together, you're able to assemble that much faster as a collaborative than as a standalone. So if there's a partner or potential partner out there listening in, I'd say if you assess, should I do this alone? Should I go at it in a collaborative manner? Condition one is what Priyanka defined, wicked solution. Condition two, the way I look at it is you want speed and scale, you move fast with that. The third one is, and I think Radhika has mentioned that, so I'm just going to summarize that one over there as well, that especially in undefined areas and new areas of work, I almost feel like it's easier to bring people together in a situation like that than where it's something tried and tested. So if I was to look at a new partner and say, okay, we want to try and come and work together, there's something we've been doing in a particular way for, let's say, 20 years, and they've been doing something for 10 years, maybe picking something which is completely new to both of us will just have us a little bit more open to working together as well. The other bit, and this I'll draw on as I've been exploring and understanding Aflatun, like I've had the pleasure of engaging with them as a partner first, and now I've hopped across on that side. When I look at them globally and they said, hey, listen, we just want to reach children with social and financial education. If you take that end goal and say, what is the way that I get there? I'll share two examples with you. Our largest partner in the Philippines, where we've been able to take this to every child in that system, is an organization called NATO. It's a NATCO. It's a financial cooperative. So they have 1.5 million members who are training government school teachers. So I love that because you've taken something which doesn't look like it's an immediate fit, and you've solved for, okay, how do I get committed people to go out there and train? And I've been chasing them to learn something from there. Especially because when I read those reports, especially during the pandemic, kids who had an older sibling teach them seem to be doing better in that scenario. So this partner's found a way to work with volunteers and youth who are going out there to train other youth. So
I
you
think
just want
Shiv,
you just sorry.
you froze for a second, Shiv.
Oh, sorry. You just want to reach lots and lots of people out there, and you say, okay, what's the best? Who is the champion within the government system that you're potentially dealing with? Does that person take an ecosystem view or not? Because otherwise, if you go in there and you bring in a very diverse mix, the whole project could get derailed, assuming you're working with government. So just to summarize it, conditions where I think it could work, undefined areas, scary projects where the scale is large and it's going to be hugely expensive. 5 orgs coming together will make that bill a lot better for each of us. The third is where the champion of the government system takes an ecosystem view themselves. Fourth, as you mentioned in the beginning, wicked problems. Fifth, when you want to move really, really fast, you can assemble a solution much quicker by bringing in different people. And if you're looking at global scale, you can pick up pieces like that as well. So yeah, I'd love to hear Dhanashree's additions to that list.
Over to you, Dhanashri.
Yeah, okay, sure. So thanks, Shiv and Radhika. I think we've created a beautiful landscape here, much like the painting that's just right behind Priyanka, which is to say collaborations do look as beautiful as they can be if they look like that painting, which means that while you're in it, you may not know what's coming out of it, but you may land on something like that should you follow a few basic principles, perhaps. And I think from that perspective, if one looks at the collaboratives that we've been part of, whether it's UA, Life Skills Collaborative, or also the state governments that we work with other partners on the ground, or when in my previous avatar, when we had intergovernmental programs or, common joint UN programs, it was very common to understand a few things that work and few things that don't. I mean, it would be unrealistic to say that there are things that everything works and everything is fine. So I think some of those learnings I do wish to share here. The first thing that I feel it's important to understand is what are we stitching together and whether that is for a common purpose or not. So identifying that purpose and the value add of each organization towards that purpose. So obviously you're creating something that's greater than your own organization or its own ambition. So long as that being or that entity is identified, it makes us all align towards that end goal. Then probably the second thing is finding synergies and continuing to maintain that openness to learning. Of course, we bring something to the table, but there's a lot more that is about what, like I want to call it, like mutual enrichment. Is it enriching me? Is it enriching my organization? And am I really putting back something as much as am I taking out of it? So if one had to really look at some of those principles, then like Radhika and Shiv said, yes, of course, everyone can't be a specialist at everything, and not every organization is working on every priority. If those are the two things one has to address, then look out for those where there are other core competencies out there, and we don't need to reinvent. So principles of openness, identifying a common purpose, or being aligned on that common purpose as well, clarity of the end goal, and of course, a good democratic participatory operating structure. How is that collaborative really working? Value add and alignment is important, but I think it's as much alignment of minds, because it's not like the diversity of perspectives goes away in a collaborative. In fact, there are many more diverse perspectives to hold together. But what's important is that somewhere your minds are aligned about where you're getting to. So I think those are a few thoughts that I'd like to share. And of the partnerships that we've been part of, it's been mutually enriching, but it's also important to recognize that there is a comparative advantage that somebody else brings in, and it's okay to acknowledge that. In some of the partnerships we have on the ground, we have ground partners who know the context better and who are adding value to that context. So this will and needs to be an intentional strategy, because it works in the favor of the goal that you're trying to achieve. So, of course, which not only enables scale, but it enriches all the organizations that are working together. So a few thoughts on those lines. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dhanashree. I think I love the way we started off the conversation. I think we all have a few use cases, a few ideas on what it takes, or what are some of the requirements to start the collaborative. Dhanashree, you spoke about diverse perspectives and the need for building alignment. And I want to explore that a little bit more with you, and take one of the key beneficiaries that we always have or always need to have, which is government, right? So as a part of the Life Skills Collaborative, you do work with the government of Mizoram, and you represent Magic Bus and the Life Skills Collaborative and engage with them. Help me understand the process of engagement. How do you go about building alignment? How do you build that co-creation really with them? And is it easier to work with the government as a collaborative, or is it harder, or when does it work better? I'd love to know a little bit more about that.
So I think the last part first, I don't know whether it is easier or harder, but I think it takes time for the government to recognize what is this collaborative? What is this other entity that you're talking about? So maybe even in the context of Life Skills Collaborative, we worked with 4 state governments, and each one of them, what helped as a starting point, I would say, is the past collaborative work that any one of the partners, any one of the collaborators had already done with the government. That had to be the starting point, because what you were after is not to establish the collaborative with the government, because that would have been a limited cause to pursue, but to establish the cause for which the collaborative was formed as taking primacy over anything else. So I think from day one as collaborators, I think we were very clear about what is it that we are trying to achieve, and help them as much see that big picture as the starting point before establishing who the collaborative was. I think as the different aspects, like Arjun mentioned at the beginning, that the Life Skills Collaborative had very clear three purposes to deliver on. So as the components of that purpose, like are we developing a contextualized glossary? Are the assessment tools being tested? As these components, the moving parts started coming together, and different partners started delivering on those, the sense of the collaborative became more obvious to the government. It wasn't so obviously at the starting, and it needn't be. So I think what they recognized is all of this is meaning something else in terms of a big picture, and there are multiple actors contributing to it. So I think that really helped. And then it was about appreciation for who all are bringing this together, and that's the Life Skills Collaborative. So I think that would be the process. And in terms of challenges, of course, I mean, there is a need. I mean, it would be far-fetched to think that there were no challenges, because this is 18 organizations working with so many different state governments in so many different languages and contexts. So what is absolutely critical is that those 2 C's, you can't escape them. One is seamless coordination, and the other is open communication. And in addition to that, when you work with government, they do need a single point of contact and interface to have. And there it is not so much about the identity as much as the individual, because who are they really in touch with, and how can that individual hold the ambition of the collaborative really together. So I think the collaboration with the government has been contributing to government priorities as well as translating their concerns from how is this going to move from pilot to scale. It was a question from day one. So what are you piloting, and where is it going to scale? So that constant ownership building of the government, or persistent sort of presence in the state, and continued engagement with 1 or 2 collaborators to be able to build that case forward, and visibility, as in with every milestone, you were creating visibility that these are the partners who worked on assessment. These are the partners that worked on the glossary. When you put the glossary and the assessment together, this is how the dots are getting connected. So really, it was that. And the past work that we've done in Mizoram has obviously helped. But again, like I said, that's only the starting point. We were creating something much more from that. And I think from here, where you go is each organization is taking something out of this and going in different directions as well. So I'd like to value the multiplier effect of the collaborative as opposed to just the purpose that it was formed for, or the individual organizations being some of the parts, so to say.
Thanks, Dhanashree. I love what you said, and I think it, just connecting the dots and making sure that everything sort of adds up as opposed to individual pieces of work. So love that. And the 2 C's, I'm going to come back to you on that, the coordination and the communication, because I want to understand more on, how can we build that better and what are some of the best practices on these areas. But I will come back to you on that. Radhika, I'm going to jump to you next. So similar question. Dhanashree walked us through how you work with governments. At Yuva, you hold the space for working with funders and partners. And talk to me a little bit about that. How do you co-create that space? How do you create value for, or how do you help both partners, funders, to see value, work together, and how does that work? Some of your thoughts from there would be great. Yeah.
Big shoes to go after, Dhanashree, like fantastic points. I was making copious notes alongside. But yeah, I mean, it was also just good listening into Shiv and Dhanashree's points and vigorously nodding along to their experiences and their learnings. To your question, Priyanka, so demonstrating the value to funders and partners together is quite the quandary. It's one we are still building our expertise in and being very honest here. That said, I think everyone agrees that collaboratives or partnerships helps divide the roles, right? Like, and along the way, then also the challenges get divided. It gets shared. The question is, does the shared value and the opportunity for a joint advocacy and the distributed responsibility in a way, does that justify the possibility of a longer turnaround time and also the possibility of getting lost in the mix? Especially from a practitioner standpoint, a partner who's also implementing on the field, where fundraising is closely linked to visibility and contribution by the partners themselves. So, and on the funders end, then they are keen to know what is the outcome of their funding for all the possibility of a shared pool of funding, thereby facilitating a larger impact. Attribution is a key question that they want answered. So yes, like varied and pertinent challenges in bringing a partnership together that is collaborating or is bringing together funders as well as practitioner organizations and also government on one platform. And this is even before arriving at that shared theory of change or defining that shared theory of change. I think it is still an opportunity and workaround, or rather opportunity and a workaround is having that neutral organization sort of anchoring and holding the collaborative. It helps ensure the commitment towards a shared goal, driving timely action, which is also a priority, and also looking for the best interests of all partners engaged. So to your first question on what does it take, I think in facilitating a collaboration between diverse, unique partners who have their own priorities, their prerogatives, as well as commitment to the approaches, some of the critical pieces, and this is in my view of and my experience, is, as mentioned by both Dhanashree and Shiv, the willingness to advocate for a larger mission and therefore, that larger shared theory of change that is broad enough to bring diverse stakeholders together, but also specific enough to define the scope of work of the collaborative. Second is a shared responsibility that allows partners to play to their strengths. And some of this also on the longer, heavier tasks of advocacy, including with the government themselves, which could be a shared responsibility taken up by that secretariat or that neutral organization that's anchoring the collaborative. But that shared responsibility or willingness to learn, something that Dhanashree emphasized on, would be a critical piece for a collaborative. And then a third, The third piece is having that neutral party that I was talking about to hold or to anchor the partnership. Year-end funding to sustain this third party or this platform for a sufficiently long period of time will also ensure that the secretariat is doubling down on their energies towards achieving the collective mission, and therefore, sustaining their own finances and their own sustainability in a way becomes the key. I think there are still some learnings to be had on what would be the best way to facilitate this. LifeSkills Collaborative is working a certain way. Yuva is working a certain way, and then Young Warrior Next within Yuva is also coming out with its own learning. So yeah, quick thoughts from me.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Radhika. That I think comes together all really well. You spoke a little bit about sometimes there is a longer turnaround time, because there are so many conversations that you have to have, and that just takes a while. And Shiv, going back to what you said right at the beginning, which was the best reason to adopt a collaborative approach is when you need fast solutions, you need them quick, you need them at scale, right? So my question now, Shiv, to you is, how do you balance that agility, that pace that is required with, like what Radhika said, that need for space to co-create? And oftentimes changes in scope, changes in requirements from partners, or just a change in mindset. How do you balance that? And the reason I ask you that is because I do know that you've worked the game and Aflatun and established so many partnerships in different domains. So would love to just understand your thoughts on how to balance that, and if you can give an example of when you've balanced that, what is the kind of impact that we're able to see on the ground and the change that we're able to see on the ground? Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
So I'm again going to pick up on one of Dhanashree's earlier points, which is who's that nodal point between the orgs, right, and between the governments. And
Shiv, I think you've frozen.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know why my net is acting up today. Has it come back?
Yes, you're back. And the last we heard was that nodal point between.
Yeah. So my thought process on this side is that whoever is that nodal person needs to, or those nodal people, let's say it's 2 or 3 people, ideally. One, I'd say you have to sell upstream and downstream in every organization. So don't sell only to the leadership of a potential partner. You've got to get involved with the implementation teams, with the research teams, with all of those people as well. Now that's going to take time, but if you do that in the early days, when a decision needs to get made, you're also able to get decisions to be bought into by people over there as well, right? So a specific example of that, and I know we were feeling our way through this, but in the Andhra Pradesh model, there was the steering committee which was created, which had the leadership of the 5 organizations which were involved. We got them together once every 4 weeks. We added other stakeholders so that once a quarter, which is, for example, we even had some of the government members join that. We also had an implementation team which drew on 1 or 2 of the top 2 or 3 members of each of those organizations as well. That unit was meeting pretty much every week as well. So from an operational standpoint, because you've got that happening, and there's someone whose day job is to make sure that communication, like what Dhanashri spoke about, communication is flowing freely and quickly across. So when there's a decision which needs to get made under pressure, clear it at both levels, clear it downstream, clear it upstream. So that to me is principle 1 to try and adopt over there. The second, one thing we started looking at, especially if you're trying new things, is to find multiple playgrounds for the same idea. Ideas fail for multiple reasons. If you've got 2 or 3 places where you're trying it, 1, the odds of something coming through are better. 2, if it fails, maybe it failed because the local space wasn't there. And again, Dhanashri spoke about that is your local partner someone who knows what's happening on the ground, which is in there? And do they have voice enough to respond and say, hey, this won't work over here to some extent as well? The last one and it goes again back to communication, that you've got to talk about body odor. When I say body odor, when stuff is smelling, there have to be early, and these may be uncomfortable conversations, but it's important that, say there's a member who's not pulling their part of the journey in there. You at this stage, I would joke and say I feel almost like the principal when I'm calling people in. But it's important because if you have an open conversation in there, you often find out more pieces in it. So very often people don't want communication which is uncomfortable to happen face to face. But in collaboratives, the more you do that, the stronger it's going to be for the team as it moves further in there. And the last of all is get the team members to play to their strengths and add diverse partners to the mix. So since you're looking for an example, we were one of the teams which put in one of the projects for which Radhika was also driving that. So I had the pleasure of going on the implementation side too. So we said, who's going to reach children at scale at home in the middle of the pandemic? To us, the answer came from rural commerce. So yeah, it was hard working with them, trying to get them moving in there. But we used a rural commerce organization to carry the material from a learning organization. We reached out to another org and said, give us your tech platform to track what these guys are doing. We reached out to a fourth one and we crowdsourced that solution and said, who's going to read what the kids are doing? So I'm just saying that, upstream, downstream, play to strength, talk about even the dirty pieces with each other and speak on that front face to face. And then you can respond when you need to change quickly. But if you've only done the sale at the leadership level, the guys and the men and the women at the downstream path, they're not going to be responsive and there's going to be resentment. But if you created that trust, it can move.
Great. Thanks, Shiv. And I love the idea of just thinking differently. Who would ever think of rural commerce as one of your partners in a collaborative? And I think that's really the wacky ideas that we all now need to come up with to be able to solve the problems that we're faced with. You ended with saying we need to build that kind of trust. And one of the, oftentimes ignored stakeholder, and I'm guilty of this also, because I spoke about government, I spoke about funders and implementing partners, but I completely forgot the community, right? And the minute you start talking about rural commerce and who's going to be looking at what the student is really doing, you need to start building that trust and connect with the community. So you've spoken briefly about it, and I know you also gave that Philippines example, but what are some of the different ways in which we can actually bring the community into the collaborative, use them as a key lever to deliver? I'd love to either hear it from a couple of examples of where you've seen this work, or just, more theoretically and then move into an example. I leave that up to you, but I would love to just understand that.
So, the one which comes to my mind right away was in Odisha. We were facing a little resistance, and for no fault of theirs. I think teachers are hugely overloaded, and sometimes I think that all of us should stop troubling them and let them just teach history or math or science, for example, and not ask them to go with all of those. And but one of the ideas that we kind of hit on over there, and this was a partner called Empower, which is Bombay based, who was driving this. So credit for this lies largely with them, and of course this lovely young lady who was the nodal point, and I think that nodal point what Anushree alluded to is very critical, who was the nodal point in over there. So she said, okay, look, we've got permission and we were trying to roll this out to about 5,000 or about, if I remember right, 8,000 children over there. The lovely idea over there, she looked around and she said, okay, who can we use for this particular delivery? She reached out to the local B.Ed college. And said, hey, listen, you guys want some live experience. So what was nice over there was the teachers were bringing the kids in. And technically speaking, they didn't have to go through the load of preparing to deliver the session. The B.Ed students were coming in over there and they were delivering the session at that point. So they were getting a live class. This was there in the local community space over there. Now, it's not like that solution is perfect. I know that there were issues we found there. For example, who's going to pay the commuting charge for the B.Ed student to arrive there when there's that scale? But the thing is that it was an idea where we started discovering a piece like that, which was coming out over there too. Then there were other models that we started discovering there. And I'll share one more example where they're using community. Different states have different paths. So in Odisha, they've gone and they've been trying to build out these alumni cells. And this again, there's a very passionate secretary in the government over there who said, "Hey, listen, create a role for them." So CMCA, which is another partner, and I think it's a Yuva partner as well, they're saying, okay, let's use one member of the alumni cell as the agent of change. Now, where that really helps is it's younger children looking up to someone who's been there. Potentially, there's a little pocket money in that setup for them as well. So these are two ideas which come to my mind, and examples which I feel, okay, we've taken baby steps on. As I said, there are lots of problems to solve with it, but two examples of like people who are kind of around the system, but they're from the community, and therefore there's buy-in.
No, I think that's great, because you have to start small, start proving, and then you move to be able to scale it. So thanks, Shiv, for lending that community lens and community voice as well to the conversation today. I want to open it up to the audience, but I also want to ask two more questions. So I'm going to do that and then open it up to the audience. So in the meantime, the audience, if you'd like to put some questions on the Q&A group or on the chat, that would be great. We'll start picking them up from there. So Radhika, my next question is to you. So we've spoken a lot about collaboratives, best practices, how to set them up. And, I think things that come through are, of course, capacity, money, monitoring mechanisms, and just commitment. And we've spoken about that in different ways. Can you talk a little bit about this from the lens of the complexities that come with a life skills program? It is a very complex, no one answer, no one approach kind of a space. And so help me understand how a collaborative operates and is operationalized with the complexity of the life skills space.
Fantastic question. I think, again, one of the questions we ourselves are finding the answers to in a collaborative way. Just stepping back, I think if I understood the question right, we're also talking about how do you sustain initiative, a learning initiative, and then specifically around life skills, right?
Exactly.
Exactly. Using
so,
the collaborative approach.
Yeah.
I think one thing then just going ahead is like sustainability of the solution that the collaborative has come together for, keeping it separate from sustainability of the collaborative itself. If you're talking about agile programs or agile organizations being the key, agility being the key to succeed, adopting it in collaboratives is also key. So Young Warrior Next, for example, started off as a gap year learning program, eventually transformed into an evidence generation exercise. The common thread was life skills, and that is why a lot of partners continued to stay on with us. A few partners who saw that a change in path, also taking a step back. But the sustained efforts was a feature that we were willing to change our approach, change our end goal, and not change as much as tweak. And therefore, it comes into the larger question that comes into play is Young Warrior Next has concluded in that evidence generation piece. So that collaborative structure itself is concluded because we had come together for that very specific goal of evidence generation on life skills. Now we want to take it ahead because our larger goal, and one that a lot of other partners are still aligned on and still want to work towards, is institutionalizing life skills in schools. Institutionalizing life skills in schools is a factor, and again, this is in my humble opinion, is a factor of both evidence generation as well as advocacy. Fantastic organizations driving commendable program on the field. I think where a collaborative can really be a game changer is providing that platform to these different organizations to come and put forth their approach. The collaborative coming up with a standardized mechanism to really say that this is impactful, and then also taking on that onus of advocating with the government, knowing that states are what, although it's a concurrent subject, states are what are driving the implementation. Even if we are able to generate evidence of 2 to 3 state models, 2 to 3 case studies of how life skills can be institutionalized, it's also information for the ecosystem. Now, towards this goal, we can be a collaborative for 2 to 3 years. We can be a collaborative for longer. as long as we align that what is the end goal we're working towards, because the collaborative structure itself might be a means to an end. The minute it starts becoming an impediment, or I think the minute partners do not see that value addition, and when I talk about partners, it's across the spectrum of funders, of implementation partners, of communities, and then young people themselves, right? Like if that common thread is not connecting us, then maybe the collaborative has lived its life, but the mission is still very much on, and maybe the collaborative needs to transform and change its approach. So just wanting to like divide the lenses around, sustainability of the solution and sustainability of the collaborative, which is a means to an end. In that context, coming to life skills specifically, I think there's no doubt that everyone has bought into the importance of life skills. The challenge in institutionalizing a life skill solution is the diversity of perspectives on what constitutes life skills. And I'm not just talking about nomenclature, but also the variety of skills that are associated with life skills. Quoting from example, government stakeholders said, yes, cooking is very important. Our boys and girls should learn it. Technically, it is a life skill, but not in the context of the life skills that you and I or the group that's gathered here is talking about, right? So even just convergence on something as simple or as basic as what do we want to institutionalize in schools requires significant effort, requires significant that, yes, this is what we will do, this is what we will not do, even though it is important. So yeah, just wanting to bring that perspective. And yes, Shiv, the LSE glossary is solving for it to a large degree.
Great. And I love the plugin, Shiv. Thanks for that. Arjun will be very, very happy. But yes, a lot of these things hopefully will get addressed through the collaborative. And since we have actually reached that, talking about the life skills collaborative, Dhanashree, I want to ask you my last question before I open up to the audience for their questions. So, Dhanashree, you've been a part of the Life Skills Collaborative, and it's 18 partners, if I'm not mistaken, 4 state government engagements, 2 years. And honestly, when you look at the track record of a lot of collaborators, it is commendable that, the kind of work that's come out of this. So, I had first said I'm going to come back to you with those 2 C's, communication and coordination. So what are some of the things that have really, really worked well in the LSE collaborative, or maybe 3 best practices? Those would be, I'd love to know a little bit more about that.
3 is too little, and I'm not saying 3 best practices. I'm simply saying 3 for anything related to the Life Skills Collaborative is a very small number. You should multiply that 18 by another 18, perhaps, to get to the various combinations that we have in place. But I think, yeah, it's a very good question because, yes, it is complex. And I'm just stepping back a little to take up 2 things that Radhika and Shiv both brought up. One is this need for a convening space and who's providing it. And this is a much bigger question than talking about who is starting or initiating or incubating a collaborative. We all need convening spaces because it's not like everybody has ready-made solutions to anything. And this takes me back to when Magicus began as an organization 23 years ago. It used to do a little convening event called Maidan. And that time, sports for development wasn't even on the radar. And this is 20 years ago. And that a number of organizations who are engaged with sports, but not necessarily with life skills, used to come together. What it allowed us to see over the last 20 years is how many more organizations are now working on it. 20 years later, a lot of organizations have made this their core mission and agenda. And I think if Matthew as a founder had to look back on his journey, then this is the one thing that he would see, that, it's taken that long, but there are 4 or 5 organizations that are able to amplify that work and take it forward, make it their own. So one of the key things is this thing about making it their own means you're giving up something. And it's hard to give up. And that's one of the learnings. But the ability to give up is what the collaborative takes, or what collaboration takes itself. And it's equally true when you work with the government, because you give up. First, you build the capability for transference. Then you build the ownership within the partners, set of partners, or maybe even within the government. And then comes the dilemma when you're actually saying, I want to give up because this is now somebody else's thing and they need to ride with it. So I think it's important to recognize this. And I just wanted to take this example before I move to Life Skills Collaborative. The other thing, and this I'm saying in the context of Life Skills Collaborative, is what Shiv brought up, the space to take risks, to innovate, to fail, and yet course correct. Now that takes sometimes resources, that sometimes takes time, and that takes risk-taking appetite of whoever is supporting that collaborative. And in this case of the Life Skills Collaborative, I think we've been very fortunate to have very open and donors who were ready to experiment with our experiment, let's put it that way. And I think that helped because we course corrected on so many different things, but more so on the voices, on the assessment tools. And the pandemic happened when we wanted to pilot it. And then we had to go online and pilot something that was like unheard of telephonically or even otherwise. So I think there was a lot of risk and innovation potential that was frankly nurtured. Now, what made 18 partners stay together and continue to be wedded over the last 2 years and going strong is, I think we were addressing a key gap area that everyone felt, each of those 18, that it is a gap area. That we don't have standardized frameworks or definitions or vocabulary or assessment, and measurement needs that kind of rigor and that kind of time. Let's put our head together. And that wasn't just one organization thinking this is a gap area. And it was also the collective call of so many different government organizations that we were talking to them, CBSE, NCRT, others. Then came NEPN with its emphasis on quality and measurement has really helped. But I think the collaborative in that context has been able to demonstrate a roadmap for many things that are written inside of NEP, which are about life skills and measurement and going beyond cognitive to socio-emotional to, higher level thinking skills. There was a roadmap in what the LSE was trying to do. So again, the emphasis on the big picture as opposed to just the parts doing their own thing within the collaborative. Well-defined roles, I would say, was important and necessary from the very start, because then what were we internalizing and what was each one of us holding as their end of the commitment and delivering on it, while obviously contributing to the collective deliberations. But it's important to have well-defined roles to deliver on. And then I think the anchor partner, and I think, Arjun, you can clap here now again, which is, of course, the glue, the binding factor. It could be a backbone organization. There are various terms for this: platform, backbone organization, anchor partner, whatever. But it needs to function as a glue, a binding factor. And that's what it needs to do. It needs to anchor and keep things on course. It's not so much being directive or instructional, but it's keeping things on course, and yet there is enough space to say this way, that way, left, right, center, whatever that might be. I think it has been a massive effort overall to just get this out. I mean, just the number of data points that came out of that one piece of assessment was 50,000 and over, counting. And that in itself was an exercise just immediately post-pandemic. But I think what has helped is the space to flesh out things, the multiple points of deliberation. Well, we do complain sometimes it's too much, but it's necessary. I think what helped the conversation along is each organization also individually wanted it to achieve its aim as much as we collectively work together, that you wanted individually also for this to succeed with that common purpose. And last but not the least, respect. I think one should not forget that in a collaborative, if there is no respect for each other's work, recognizing each other's area of expertise, whatever we bring to the table, and respecting that conversation is very important. And therefore, the communication where the same understanding is equally with the government, when you have government as the other partner, that respect and consistent engagement, that is what I think made the big difference. So, well, there were not 3, and as I said, it's 18 into 18, but those are the different learnings. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Dhanashree. Words that I'm going to be taking away are respect and trust. I think that's not said enough, but to be able to establish a collective, at least from my perspective, those are some of the softer aspects that don't get covered enough. So thank you for that. We now will open up to the audience, and I do have one question that Shiv, let me start with you, and then Radhika, Dhanashree, if you'd like to add, would please do. So Nina from Udhyam has asked this question, which is, it's great that we're looking at the external pieces, but what are some of the pieces that we should iron out internally, be prepared with, before we even think of approaching external partnerships or opening ourselves up for this kind of an engagement? So Shiv, over to you.
So, Meena, from my little experience, and I'm not an expert on this side because I'm still learning on this journey, but 2 or 3 things that I've seen work in the past. One is, if you're going to approach that entity or someone for that partnership, possibly try and spot a gap that your org is going to fill in whatever they're trying to deliver. If you can find that, that's going to help. 2, someone in your team needs to have their day job, or at least a key part of their day job, allocated to smoothing this relationship. To me, the 2 leaders coming together is only a small part of it. Like, who's going to iron the relationship? I'd go so far as to say that, is there value in that, in the way we're appraising people at the end of it? Like, in terms of, if someone's putting in a big effort with that, are you actually giving that person value at the end of the year appraisal? So structure it in that way, where if you're going for a partnership, it needs to be aligned from top to bottom in terms of how we pay our people, what we value as a system. Speaking of the values, and I think Dhanashree spoke about that one as well, maybe do a little homework and assess what other partners who've joined that party have felt. Is there respect which comes both ways for the expertise which comes in? So just to distill that down to 4 takeaway points. 1, what are you bringing in that is missing in what they're delivering over there? 2, and this one I didn't mention earlier, could you cross-pollinate? For example, you have a beautiful relationship with another partner in another geography. Maybe offer that to that collaborative. They'll be happy to come in because it's a win-win both ways. 3, adjust the organization when you say internally, so that there's value given for people who are doing this. Have a dedicated person kind of look at the alliance, because at a pressure point, you need that person with the space to do that over there. Does that work as 4 starting points?
That works very well. Thank you. Thanks, Shiv. And Nina has a follow-up question as well, which is, when might it be better not to partner? So you fix whatever you need to fix internally, but when is it not a good idea to partner? What are some stages of work, or are some stages of work more conducive to partnerships? And I'll ask Dhanashree, from an implementing org perspective, would love to hear your thoughts on that, and then Shiv, Radhika will open it up to you.
So I think on the first part, absolutely right in asking when is it better or probably more efficient not to partner. I mean, because you're not partnering for partnership's sake, but it has to add value. So therefore, for that first one, I think if it's a defined area of work, if it's your own core competency, you've already worked on it at scale with speed, tested it, got evidence, you're no longer in your pilot stage, and you've sort of moved on to create enough evidence, including rigor in that evidence. So it's not just internal evidence, but maybe third party, enough scrutiny, you know how to do this, and you want to replicate more of that, maybe even at scale or even in another geography. where you are already present, perhaps, then I don't think that's required. So a core competency that's something that you have, and you're doing something that you've already done with enough evidence. But I think at what stages is a good question, because it's important to understand that these are stages of our work, no matter what we decide to pursue each one as an organization. So when you're co-creating something, of course, you need perspectives. I mean, there's no point in being sort of ignorant of what might be out there. So seek it out, get people along, convene, collaborate, understand, have you done this, what works, what doesn't work. And even there, I feel that, like Radhika mentioned earlier, it might be a limited purpose partnership. It's not like it's going to go on forever. Like, I might do this just to be able to get a sense of who's doing what and what's a gap area. How do I address it? Do I need to address it with them? Do I have a competency for it? Do I need to seek it? Am I reinventing the wheel, or am I doing something new? I think for that, you need a limited purpose partnership. It does sound like the legal document, but it is a limited purpose partnership, because you should be clear what the purpose is. And I think there's another stage when you're doing something completely new, untested, undefined, also unrefined within the organization itself. I think it's completely good to reach out, and you're looking for an innovation. Like, too often we're too tied up with doing the things the same way. And there comes a time, and even for Magic Bus, I think the scale at which we operate, we are now 400,000, we will get to 2 million. You can't be it's not a multiplication game anymore, and it should not be, because then, I mean, in the life skills parlance, what's the fun? I mean, there's no joy really in it. So then I think you should innovate, and that innovation, to assume that only you have it, would be not fair. And probably not even realistic. So look for innovations out there, bring them in, enrich your program, because you can never say this is perfect and ready to go.
Thanks, Dhanashree. That's really, really helpful. Meena had one more question. And so Radhika, I'm going to come to you with two questions. One is the one from Nina, which is that once you've identified what all you need to iron out internally, and her next question was, you know that this is actually something that you should be approaching in a partnership mode, and this is not something that is to be avoided, and Dhanashree walked us through all of that. Then what next? How do you initiate those conversations? How do you identify some places that you want to reach out to? So that one question would love your thoughts on. And then the second one is, everyone has spoken about the role of a nodal / backbone organization in holding a collaborative together. From your own experiences, what are some of the skills that help you do this? What are the do's and don'ts, and how do you oftentimes, and this is where, how do you keep your own agenda away from the agenda that the collaborative has, right? So how do you manage those relationships? So over to you, Radhika. I have both questions, so if you need me to repeat any of them, you let me know.
Sure. Thanks, Priyanka. To Nina's question around how, like, once it's been identified that you want to join a collaborative, how to go about it. If I understood that question right, I think the simplest is, as an anchor organization, we are very open to hearing from you. LinkedIn might not be the best platform just because the inbox does get flooded, but all our websites, and I can speak to Yuva especially, we do have an option for you to connect with us directly, and we do get back to you. So if you have identified an area that you want to collaborate with us on, great. If you want to collaborate with us on an existing collaborative, for lack of a better word, or a partnership platform like Young Warrior Next, there is systematic information that we put out, like so sort of just advocating that this is a collaborative, or this is an initiative that we are calling for partners to work with us on. We do put it out. For example, right now we have a call for solutions for partners working on a variety of different initiatives that ties into Yuva's goals. It is going to be a partnership it is going to be a partnership initiative, in that if you're working on even one area, we want to create a sort of collaborative structure to build the synergies with different organizations working towards the common goal. So for example, career guidance is a focus area. So writing to us is the simplest. Keeping an eye out for some of the organizations that run collaboratives is another way. I think LinkedIn is a great platform to just stay connected. And from personal experience, I know just like with Life Skills Collaborative also, we had just initiated a conversation with Arjun to see how we can collaborate better. So yeah, as simple as it sounds, just writing and put your best. Another one is also just initiating or trying to initiate a collaborative of your own. I know Shiv has some experience in it where he said, no one's doing anything on EMC, let me do something, and went about getting partners together, right? And that's where it started getting institutionalized in a different way. But sometimes the first step can be from you, and then an anchor organization or whatever form or name you want to call it can come in and take over that role as well. Now that is a risk, but who knows, right? I hope that helps, Nina. Second is, Priyanka, your question. I'm sorry, I forget what does it take to be a collective? What does it take to be an
No. So what does it take to be a backbone organization, right? What are the skills that are required? How do you maintain that the agenda of the group over and above the organization's own personal agenda? It sometimes, I mean, most of the time it would be aligned, but sometimes there are deviations. So what are the skills required, and how do you maintain the direction?
So I can speak to, like, as a backbone organization, there will be a broader agenda. So any partnership platform, even if you look at a World Economic Forum, which is partnership platform in a lot of ways, they have their sub-agendas. Similarly, at Yuva or Generation Unlimited, as they're known globally, we have our sub-agendas. Within it, we are looking to work with partners because our goals are very ambitious. I don't think there'll be a conflict of interest between the collaborative, or let's put it in an example, between a Young Warrior Next and a Yuva goal, right? Young Warrior Next was specifically on life skills. Yuva, one of the areas they want to work on is life skills or 21st century skills. There's no conflict in the agenda because one is, again, a means to an end. It is helping us serve the larger organization agenda. Two areas that do come into play is one, personal biases. As much as we can try to be neutral, and I'm being very candid here, your own interaction with certain organizations, even frequency of interactions with a certain organization, can influence your perspective. So as an anchor organization, we will always want to be neutral, but personal bias as humans is also very real. And therefore, putting in those structures, those governance structures that Dhanashree spoke about, democratic, convening, and ensuring it's consultative, having structures that take out or limit the human bias would be key to the success of an anchor organization. Second is balancing speed and scale. I think with collaboratives, because we want to be together, sometimes timelines get affected. On the other hand, because we want to drive a tight timeline, consultation takes a backseat. There's no clear answer. I think it goes back to having the trust and respect as key values of the collaborative itself, and then reminding the anchor organization also that it's okay to maybe slow down, or it's okay to speed up, and ensuring that the anchor organization is also part of the collective and is not just just ensuring that they are also factored into the trust and respect.
Thank you so much for that, Radhika. Before I ask the panelists to start giving the closing sort of messages that we want to leave the group with, are there any other questions? I see one more. Okay, so I think we've covered all of the questions, and we're almost towards the end of time as well. So I'm gonna ask Shiv, Radhika, Dhanashree, just the way we started with a generic question to all of you, I'm going to now end with a question to everyone, which is for the folks who are listening in, what is the key message that you want them to leave with? And it could be anything. The world is your oyster. Within the partnerships for life skills area, of course, but would love to just what are some of the points that you'd like to leave the audience with? So Shiv, can we start with you?
So create space for all your partners. If you're about to sign something and you think you have 1 class, get 4. If you're about to go after a state, go after 3, because then your partners have space to express themselves. And the next one is Dhanashree's point that I remember her talking about the last time I met her, which is think about institutionalization and public goods early in the journey. And then that will speak back towards Radhika's point as to how long will you stay on this journey. If you've got that thought process early, that will help. The third, come together at multiple levels in the organization for multiple functions. Maybe it's curriculum, maybe it's tech, maybe it's funding. And last of all, speak freely with people and often. And there are going to be times when you feel shortchanged. There are going to be times where you think, oh God, that partner is favoring the other partner. So talk about it. Because as Radhika said, we're human. And if you don't speak and you leave it simmering inside, you're affecting the heart, which is at that collab. So yeah, these are my 4.
Thank you. I love that. Dhanashree, over to you.
That's very well put, I must say. So I think where you started, Priyanka, this is the age of collaboratives. It's like I think some part of it one must, if one had to credit anything to the pandemic at all, I think it's our 2 things. One is our everyone's ability to be able to be efficient and work from home and remotely and from here. And the second is because of that, also learn to collaborate and work together, because you're just not in the same space. So if that is it, then this is the age of collaboratives. Everyone's working at huge scales and with large ambitions. And as far as life skills, young people and adolescents is concerned, which is a space within which we're talking right now, just the sheer numbers should make us sit up and think. If we're talking about all of those 364 million, if you take right from 10 to 24, then there is no other way but to collaborate. So there should be a reason to come together, and this is an age for that. So invest in them, nurture them, be an honest part of collaboratives, contribute to them, and to those of others out there, support convening spaces. They may not have tangible outcomes, but they are still necessary. So if you try to measure what came out of this convening space, I will not have 4 indicators for you, but that convening space itself is the outcome and it's needed. And last but not the least is continue innovating. Collaborations help push boundaries. And if we are not pushing the boundaries, then we are not doing justice to our purpose, why we are here, and how can we do things better, much more efficient and effectively. And yeah, as Shiv said, continue to coordinate and continue to communicate. Those C's are not going away anywhere. So I think those are a few things from me to continue to look at that C of collaborative with the other 2 C's put together.
Thank you so much. Radhika, over to you for the last sort of message to leave the group with.
Yeah, I think like Shiv and Dhanashree have already covered all the points. I would just want to bring in one. It's more of an ask as much as an area that we are working on. It's bringing youth back in the center of our solutions. And I am also equally susceptible to it, is looking at young people as beneficiaries of our programs. And they're so much more. They're so innovative in and of themselves. They know what they want. And bringing their voices at the center of our solutions can also help us push boundaries. So I think in thinking about life skills and thinking about what next on life skills and thinking about your programming therein, youth centricity and how we can bring young people back in the center of it.
Great. Thanks. Thank you so much, Shiv, Dhanashree, Radhika. I mean, there's just been so much that I'm taking away. I've also taken copious notes while trying to manage the panel. So thank you so much. I think one of the things that I step away with is just, a real appreciation for the kind of soft skills that it takes to really be a part of a collaborative, run a collaborative, and really have that common agenda. It's a lot about, and you've all said this, trust, respect, an attitude where you're actually building those convening spaces without bringing your own egos to the table. So I think, that's one thing that I'm really taking away. And thank you all for being so, open and sharing today. I will hand over to Arjun to close the session today. Arjun, over to you.
Thank you so much. This has been so fantastic. And, I think we've had the audience stay with us for quite some time in this. And normally after 5, you see people kind of getting fidgety about dropping off. But I think personally, I've enjoyed it. I think we started out by defining what kind of problems call for a collaborative. And I love the phrase she used when he said big problems. And I've been trying to kind of figure that out in my head, what makes a problem very I think for me, am I audible? Sorry, everybody froze for a minute, so I just want to check. Okay.
Yeah,
super.
Yeah, you froze for a sec as well.
So I think for me, it was complex problems that are really complex and require multiple stakeholders and multiple dimensions from which they need to be solved for, whether they're in terms of the technical issues, whether they're geographical issues, whether they're sectorial issues. If, a problem that kind of goes across all of these dimensions needs a collaborative. The other point I'm taking away is scale. And I think any problem that has to be solved at scale brings a need for a collaborative to come in. And the third thing that I took away is an undefined problem. So where it is new, we don't really know the space, and we kind of want to brainstorm fresh ideas, different perspectives, diversity needs to be brought in. So for me, those were 3 clear indications that the panel gave us to say, here's when you should think about a collaborative. And to Nina's question, I think kind of answers to that, right? If you're looking to evaluate yourself to be a part of a collaborative, are you dealing with any of those 3? I think that kind of makes sense. But other than that, I think, Priyanka, thank you so much for moderating this. There have been such great insights about trust, about, even the point about giving up. And I think that's such a fantastic point that Dhanashree made, that if you're not ready to give up in a collaborative, then you're not really actively engaging in a collaborative, because it's only when you give up that you get so much back more. So from the LifeSkills Collaborative side, I thank you all for your time, for the gems of wisdom that you've shared with us. I love interacting with each one of you, and I hope to continue to have that opportunity. And we also thank all our guests who joined us today. Reach out to us. Radhika has sent you an open invitation. I have always, many of you talk to me at different points in time. Shiv, I know, loves these conversations, and I think it will be great. And Priyanka herself is running a big collaborative, so we would love to kind of keep engaging this. We will be convening the 6th edition of the LifeSkillsNet in March, as you might be aware. And if you're not, LifeSkillsNet is a quarterly meeting of like-minded stakeholders that come together. If you think there are certain aspects that you would like to talk about, or you would like to present or share, please write to us, reach out to us, and let us know what is it that you would like to hear next on the LifeSkillsNet. But we'll be in touch, and this is also being streamed live on LinkedIn. We will also put this out on YouTube, so if you need to come back and look at it, we welcome you to do that. I know we have a few more minutes on hand, but I think in the spirit of Christmas and early holidays for some of you, we can possibly close this meeting early. Once again, thank you, Dhanashree, Shiv, Radhika, Priyanka.
Thank you.